blocker up here? Oh, I see you. Okay. You ready? Melanie? Okay. Good afternoon. We're here today to discuss a series of events that happened over the weekend across the city. I'll start with the most recent homicide that happened Sunday just after 9 p.m. on the 1900 block of Vaughn Street. When officers arrived on the scene, they located the victim, Rhonda Jones, inside the residence suffering from multiple stab wounds. She was transported to a local hospital and was pronounced deceased shortly after. The suspect, Michael Wright, was taken into custody a short distance from the scene and charged with murder. This homicide is domestic violence related, as Rhonda and Michael are brother and sister. On Saturday, May 6, at 4:41 a.m., officers responded to a shooting on the 500 block of East Whittier Street. Upon arrival, the officers located an adult male victim identified as David Davis, suffering from a gunshot wound. He was later pronounced deceased at the hospital. This is still an ongoing investigation, but we do know the homicide stemmed from an argument with the known suspect. On May 6 at 3:31 a.m., officers were dispatched to the 1400 block of St. Clair Avenue on the report of a shooting. Officers arrived at the scene and found 5 individuals suffering from gunshot wounds. Taylon Rowland was pronounced deceased at that scene. 2 victims were treated and released for their injuries, and 1 remains in the hospital, but he is expected to survive. The suspect, Keith Pleasant, suffered from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and he later died at the hospital. This shooting was also domestic violence related. Keith and Taylon were believed to be in a relationship, boyfriend and girlfriend, and lived in the apartment. The other 3 victims were at that residence when this incident occurred. This marks 12 domestic violence homicides so far in 2023. Now we want to update you on the police officer involved shooting in the Short North. At 2:33 a.m. Saturday morning, we received a report of shots fired at 624 North High Street near the Guild House restaurant. At the same time, several blocks north on High Street, 2 officers were conducting patrols with the city's food truck license inspectors when they encountered a group of pedestrians fighting on the street. They stopped to break up that fight when an explosion of gunfire rang out near 847 North High Street. A citywide 10-3 alert was issued, meaning every available car in the city was routed to the Short North. The officers at the scene immediately ran toward the gunfire and engaged the suspects. As you will see from the body-worn camera footage we're about to share, this scene was extremely chaotic with multiple volleys of gunfire before the officers even fired their weapons. In total, between both scenes on High Street, we have 10 individuals who were shot, all between the ages of 18 and 27. It is not yet clear how many individuals were shot at each scene. We had multiple people leaving the area and showing up as walk-ins at local hospitals. At this time, all of those who were shot are expected to survive. Also, no officers were injured during this incident. It is not clear at this point whether the 2 High Street incidents are connected. We have 1 person in custody, Jalen Bradley, 20 years old. He was transported to the hospital in critical condition, but has since been upgraded to stable. The body-worn camera video will show a gun was recovered from him. Now I'm going to ask Sergeant Albert to come up so that he can walk you through the body-worn camera footage.
Good afternoon. Shortly, we're going to play the body camera footage from the officer-involved shooting on Saturday morning. There are 2 videos that we're going to play for you. We had 3 officers that night who discharged their firearms. However, one officer was working special duty and did not have a body camera assigned to them at the time, which that is not required of them within our policy. The first video we're going to play for you is from Officer Carl Harmon. Officer Harmon and his partner, Officer Velas, were assigned to be with the food truck inspectors like Chief said. Due to this, they were not able to respond to the initial shooting call. At the beginning of the video, you will hear you'll hear sirens and you'll see cruisers driving by with lights activated. Those are the cruisers responding to the initial shooting call in the 600 block of North High Street. About a minute into the video, you'll see Officers Harmon and Velas break up a couple of different physical fights that are occurring on the sidewalk. This goes on for quite a while until you hear the shots being fired in a real close distance from where the officers are at. The officers run towards the gunshots as more shots are being fired and discharge their firearms. At the conclusion, Officers Harmon and Vilas approach a male and a female. You'll see Officer Vilas kick a firearm away from the male, and Officer Harmon attends to the male while Officer Vilas attends to the female who is nearby. These officers stay with the individuals on scene until medics arrive. At this time, we'll play Officer Harmon's video. It's about 9.5 minutes in length.
Just start out some minutes. Yes. Ready, I need a medic at 847 over. Hey, you guys got a medic kit? I need a medic stuff. I got 50 medics down. Hey, what's your name, buddy? I got medics
As you can see, officers dealing with very chaotic, a couple different incidences going on during that. It's important to note that Officer Harmon during that is airing I need a med kit, I need a med kit. These officers were on foot. Their cruiser is quite a bit of blocks away, which is why he didn't have the medical, kits that we carry in our cruisers. Didn't have it readily with him because he was on foot during this time. The next video we're going to play for you is from Officer Vilas. It's been shortened just in an effort to save time, so it's about 4 minutes long. It'll start right before the shots start, and it'll show his vantage point, and we'll show him tending to the female.
So, during this incident, there were 11 guns recovered from the area. We know and understand the media and public have been eager for additional information on this incident. Please understand, this was an extraordinary event with a very large scene and large number of individuals involved. In addition to that, the Bureau of Criminal Investigations is conducting its own independent investigation of the officer-involved shooting, which means there's evidence and information we don't have access to. Our investigators have been working around the clock to sort out the many moving parts to this incident. We want to share everything we can with you, but we can't have vast information come at the expense of accurate information. Now I'd like to bring Mayor Ginther up for some remarks.
Thank you, Chief, and thanks to all our officers under extraordinary circumstances. I want to thank them for their courage, their coolness under incredible pressure, the compassion they showed those that were shot in the line of fire, in danger. Violence that took place across across our community this weekend was truly horrific. As Chief indicated, Ohio BCI is leading the investigation into one of the incidents in the Short North. Their work will continue. We'll provide additional updates as we learn more. But this wasn't the only violence that occurred. There were also 2 domestic violence incidents as well. And just to reinforce what the chief shared, the community needs to know there have been 12 homicides this year, at the beginning of May, from domestic violence situations, well more than all of last year. 20% of the homicides in the city of Columbus this year have been out of domestic violence situations. If you're in trouble domestically, or if you know someone who is, call Choices at 614-224-4663. Please continue to share that information. We need faith leaders, we need trusted community leaders, others, to make sure this information is out there and that we're serving and supporting families in crisis before there are tragic circumstances. These challenges, however, and sadly enough, are not exclusive to Columbus. We need lawmakers, the state and federal levels, to step up and help us get illegal crime guns off our streets. As the chief said, 11 firearms just at this one incident. If these folks are unable or unwilling to do their part to address this nation's growing gun crisis, then we have a simple request. Get out of our way. Let us lead at the local level to enact basic, common sense gun safety legislation. We know what we need to do. We have done it before. It's incumbent on this country to rise to this moment. All we want to do is keep guns out of the wrong hands, out of the hands of criminals, in order to keep our residents safe. Universal background checks, red flag laws, prohibiting the sale of bump stocks, banning the sale of automatic weapons. These are things that virtually everyone agrees on. These aren't controversial. This isn't constitutional overreach. Simply put, this is what this moment demands and requires. We have every intention of seeing this work through. All of us have a role to play in making our communities safer. Faith leaders, prosecutors, judges, employers, parents, everyone. We need the community to continue to offer tips and information to the police so we can get these violent criminals off our streets. And we all need to do better. We're better than this. Our community is better than this. Together, we will do all that is required to make Columbus the safest big city in America. But clearly, we have work to do. Please welcome Councilmember Remy.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. And thank you to our officers that were put in this type of situation over the weekend. The violence that's occurring in this city this past weekend is completely and utterly unacceptable. People are stealing cars. They're ending up with guns from the cars. They are carrying guns. The conflict resolution is resulting in guns. It is time to say enough is enough. Public safety is a fundamental right of any healthy and thriving community. Without adequate public safety measures, people cannot feel secure in their homes, on the streets, or in public spaces. Law enforcement, of course, plays a critical role in ensuring public safety. Our officers, as you can see, work tirelessly day in and day out, putting their lives on the line. But we can't put that burden on just them. As a council member, I, along with my colleagues, can draft legislation. We pass legislation only to be usurped by the Attorney General and the State House? Simple. Lock your guns up. Don't leave them in the car. These are all very simple things to do and still protect your Second Amendment rights. But police can't arrest their way out of this, and we can't legislate our way out of this. We have to be accountable to ourselves and to each other, and we need to be working together tirelessly to make sure that people feel safe being on the streets in the city of Columbus. Enough is enough. Again, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it.
We'll take any questions.
Of the 10 people who were shot, can you explain to me, were 2 injured, shot by CPD, and 8 others injured in the exchange of gunfire? Or can you give us a better idea of who was injured how?
And that's the problem with a complex situation like this. At this time, we cannot definitively tell you how many people may have been injured or shot by officers. We do know at least one, but we can't tell you definitively. There was so many gun shots that were occurring, and there was so multiple crossfire that at this point, with this being a BCI investigation, we're going to have to wait for information from them to be able to make that determination. And additionally, the reason we can't tell you from what scene people were from, whether it was from the 233 or from 7 minutes later, is because you had people leaving the scene, showing up at hospitals, walk-ins, and we had to make a determination whether they were tied to the scene or not, which took time. And so during the investigation, during that course of investigation, we had to determine whether or not these victims were actually from Short North, or were they from somewhere else, because as you can imagine, everyone may not be truthful about where they were injured.
Can you explain the role that the male and the female played in this situation?
Again, with this being a BCI investigation, all we do know at this point is what you saw in the video, that the young man had a firearm, and that's what we know.
So why did it take CPD more than 2 days to tell us how many people were injured?
Again, like I said, because the people were showing up at the hospital and they weren't saying, oh, I got shot at Short North. We had to literally figure out and investigate and determine how many actual victims there were that were from this incident. In addition, with BCI doing the investigation, we don't have access to all the information, so we rely on them sometimes, and we're waiting on information to be given to us, but we were able to finally make that determination. As you can imagine, not only was that scene chaotic, but we also had to attend to 2 other incidents that were occurring within a 2-hour period. So it took additional time to be able to get that information. And what we want to do is make sure that we're reporting as accurately as we can, which is why I came out initially to give as much information as I could with the intention of following up like we're doing now.
So the guns that were recovered, can you explain to
I'm
me
sorry,
whether
Kim.
it was weapons under disability, while there were guns that were stolen? Why were those guns taken?
We just know that they were recovered during this incident. Again, BCI is leading this investigation, so a lot of that information would have to come from them.
Gun violence has been an increasing problem in Columbus over these past, I would say, few years. I heard Mayor Ginther even say now it's legislation. What do we do? Legislation's not doing anything. It's an increasing problem. What's next?
We continue to do what we're doing. We continue to fight to try to get that legislation. We continue to increase our enforcement efforts. We continue to increase our prevention efforts. We continue to work collaboratively with the community as well as other city entities to try to make sure that we're doing everything we can to decrease this violence and get guns off the street. This year, we've already taken over 1,100 guns off the street, and it's May, year to date.
But it's important to remember, though, when you state your question, it's not completely accurate. In 2022, there was a 33% reduction in homicides and violent crime from 2021. We know we can do this. We know that when we all work together, police, community, faith leaders, business owners, and legislators, that we can move the needle and make our community safer. We know we can do this. It's upon us to act. And as the council member said, we're going to continue to fight. We're not going to yield. We're going to continue to push thoughtful, common sense gun safety legislation to protect our officers and to protect our neighbors. And we will not rest.
What does this mean for Short North? Will there be a higher police presence now, in response to this, or what does that look like?
So I will let Assistant Chief Bacher speak a little more, but what I will tell you is this. We have summer initiatives that are coming up. There were already plans to be able to increase and make sure that our enforcement actions are present in not just Short North, but in every neighborhood across the city. But if you want to speak specifically.
Two things that I think are important to point out. Number one, community safety is a collaborative effort. From the early morning hours of Saturday and regularly, we work with our partners in the Short North Alliance to talk about community safety and what that looks like and how to make it a safer area of town. Additionally, last week was the end of the first week that we redistricted. And so you can see from that video, when the shots started, officers were physically present. They were there on the street. That's not at the expense of other parts of town, but they were there. Officers were assigned to the inspectors, and then there were also special duty officers there. And so there is a significant police presence. The conversations that we need to have moving forward, and we continue to have those with residents and business owners in the Short North. What does that look like? Does it look like crime prevention through environmental design? Does it look like increased technology, additional video cameras, license plate readers? What does that look like? And how do we curb this violence? And so we talk about the easy accessibility of guns and the willingness of people to pull the triggers of those guns. Both of those things need to be impacted to curb the violence.
Mayor, can I ask you a question? After watching that video, and knowing that there were uniformed police officers all up and down High Street, how do you tell citizens, how do you tell people from the suburbs, come down to the Short North, it is safe?
My wife and I had dinner there Saturday night, and the chief was there and officers throughout the community. The Short North is safe, but every neighborhood could be safer. And as you know, there were homicides in places other than the Short North. Those neighborhoods matter too. And our responsibility as city leaders is to make sure that every neighborhood is as safe as possible. We're going to be meeting with leaders of the Short North here in the next week or so to talk about some more ideas, maybe some ideas the chief has posed before that folks have been reluctant to buy into, that we think we can try some new and innovative things, as Assistant Chief Bodker said, and we're going to be able to do that. Her leadership and the redistricting that's put into place is going to help us reduce time for calls for service, have greater police presence in more neighborhoods throughout the city. Getting folks in the right place at the right time is going to be critically important. But we believe that collaboratively we can do better.
So Chief, if I can ask you, again, in watching this video and knowing the other crime scenes that your officers were dealing with, the toll that it's taken on the division, on the department, because there was another homicide, a stabbing this morning.
Absolutely. So, like we talked about, clearly, this incident of having this many people shot in a weekend, that's an anomaly. That's not a norm for us. But however, we had to respond to these scenes. But what I will tell you, the officers did a phenomenal job. Not only the officers, but the supervisors, the lieutenants, the commanders, the deputy chiefs. We were all out there. They all responded. They were all hands-on. And we asked for aid. We asked for other people to step in, which they've done, which we do for them all the time as well. It's not ideal for us to, have to do this, but at the end of the day, we know that our response is for the community. It's our response to make sure that we not only respond to the scenes, but we arrest the people that are responsible. And I will tell you, there's a false narrative out there. We are arresting more people than we've ever arrested before. We are definitely holding people accountable for these crimes. So is it taking a toll on our officers for an incident like this? This is not the norm. This is an anomaly for a situation like this to happen, but they handled it. I couldn't have asked for a better response, and I couldn't have asked for a better way that the officers responded to this incident.
A question for the mayor or the chief. We talk about that legislation changing last summer, the gun legislation. Is there specific data or any specifics that you can give us that where you saw that change from a year ago to now after that changing of legislation?
You want to?
All I would say is clearly there's a connection here between access to firearms in these domestic violence situations. And if we had red flag laws in place, those folks in the family that had been targeted by those abusers could have sought out help. Could they have stopped every one of these domestic violence homicides? Probably not. But if it made a difference for one family, it's worth that fight.
Chief, or somebody, could you explain whether this incident on High Street or the incidents on High Street were domestic violence related, or if something else? At this point, do you know?
We can't really get too much into the specifics of the investigation. We do know that there were at least two parties involved that were having some sort of conflict. But again, with this being a BCI investigation, there's very limited information we can share in regards to the specifics.
Secondly, the gunfire, which looked like a gun battle to me, in close proximity to buildings. Can you speak a little bit about the danger of bullets ricocheting? I've got a daughter who lives right above where this happened, and she woke up and, looked out and was just shocked. She doesn't want to live there anymore. And you think all these people coming out of bars, there was an awful lot of people we saw on the sidewalks.
That's our concern with the amount of guns and the gun violence that is occurring. But I will tell you again, it's not specific to Columbus. Unfortunately, we're seeing this across the nation. You're seeing it in Dallas. You're seeing it in Iowa. You're seeing it all over the place. So that is our concern, which is why the mayor spoke specifically and city council talked about gun legislation and trying to make sure that we have the ability to keep guns out of the hands of the people that should not have guns.
How about officers who have to return fire? Is there an extra strategy when you got buildings surrounding you?
Well, we
or
have
you're
to-
in a mall and you know that
We have
bullets are going to ricochet?
we have to make a decision. Do we try to preserve the life that's on the street right then? We have to make a decision, and that's one of the reasons that we train, and we train the way that we do specifically for scenarios, for situations. Our officers are extremely well trained in firearms. They're extremely well trained in when to shoot, when not to shoot. So what I will tell you is that officer has to make that decision in that moment. If they feel that there's a threat to their life or someone else's life, do I take a shot? That is the decision that a lot of people in this room probably will never understand, but that officer in that moment has to make a decision. Is this the right thing that I'm doing at this moment to preserve a life?
In your opinion, was it with the number of people that were around, bystanders who?
Well, knowing that 10 people were shot and not understanding or knowing how many people were shot in a specific incident, what I can tell you is I will never Monday morning quarterback. I will wait for the investigation to be complete. But if those officers felt at that moment that someone's life is in imminent danger, then they did what they were trained to do.
Last question. Chief, you talked about, some of the legislations that council is working on. Have you reached out to the court system to make sure that those people who your officers have arrested, you talked about the amount of people you've arrested, especially for having guns or weapons under a disability, making sure that they're actually being penalized and not being released back out, getting guns again, so you have another situation like that?
That's a conversation that is continuous with not only the prosecutors, but with the judges as well. That is something that we're always meeting with, talking to them about, and trying to make sure that we are representing well, because that is a reality. We want to make sure that the people that are being charged with these incidents are actually being penalized for what they did and making sure that they're not on the streets to hurt anyone else.
Thank you.
Thank you.